You won't heal from a narcissist until you know this. You know, there's a kind of suffering that doesn't leave a bruise. But it leaves you bleeding all the same, and it's not the kind of wound people notice. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. It's subtle. Like a fog creeping in, until one day you wake up, and the mirror's a stranger. That's what happens when you've been in the orbit of a narcissist. They don't just hurt you, they redefine you. Slowly, quietly, strategically. You end up walking through life doubting your own instincts, distrusting your memories, apologizing for your presence. And that's not just psychological damage, it's spiritual erosion. You don't just lose your bearings. You lose yourself. You people talk about heartbreak like it's some kind of poetic tragedy. But this is existential theft. It's when someone hijacks your reality, that rewrites your identity, and leaves you holding the shattered pieces like it was your fault they dropped you. And here's the thing, nobody escapes unchanged. If you've walked away from someone like that, you didn't just leave. You survived, and that survival came at a cost. But there's good news. If you're still here, still breathing, still asking questions, you haven't lost. Not yet. There's still a way forward. There's still you, buried beneath the rubble. And healing. Healing isn't about getting back what you had. It's about discovering what you never knew was yours to begin with. Let's talk about what that journey really looks like. Firstly, the psychological aftermath. You don't walk away from a narcissist untouched. That's a delusion. You walk away altered, sometimes beyond recognition. And if you don't admit that, if you try to pretend you're fine just because you got out, you've already lost the first battle. Because the truth is, they don't just break your heart, they reprogram your perception. The great Russian writer Fyodor Dostoevsky once wrote, "The mystery of human existence lies not in just staying alive, but in finding something to live for." And that's exactly what the narcissist robs from you. Your sense of what's real, what's meaningful, what's yours. They infect your values with their agenda. They install doubt like spyware, and you become a ghost in your own body. You begin to question your favorite color, your music tastes, your decisions, your memory, even your pain. You look back at moments you know hurt, and then wonder if maybe you made it all up. That's the psychological aftermath. That's the real cost. It's not the fight you had. It's the fact that you stopped trusting your capacity to know truth at all. That's a tragedy. Because when a person loses faith in their own perception, they're no longer autonomous. They become prey to anyone with a stronger voice. Now their healing starts here, not with affirmation, not with self-care Sundays, but with truth, the hard, unrelenting kind. You were manipulated. You were lied to. You were broken down. And naming that without flinching is the first real act of power. Second, the breaking point, from bleeding to breakthrough. There comes a moment. And it doesn't arrive like a lightning strike. No, it creeps in like morning light through a broken window. Quiet, undeniable. It's when the pain, the anger, the exhaustion stops being something you drown in and becomes something you rise with. It's not triumph. Not yet. It's surrender. But not the weak kind. It's the kind of surrender that says, "I've had enough." Enough apologizing. Enough rehearsing what you wish you'd said. Enough replaying their last words like a curse. This is when the soul starts to whisper, "No more." And that whisper, that's sacred. That's resurrection. Like people talk about healing like it's some neat little 5-step program. It's not. It's messy. It's circular. It's 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, the collapse on the floor, and then somehow crawl again. But that moment, the one where you stop fighting for their approval and start fighting for your peace, that's the beginning of everything. And here's what no one tells you: that breakthrough doesn't need a courtroom verdict. It doesn't need an apology. It doesn't need closure with a bow on top. It needs choice, your choice, to stop feeding the fire, to walk away from the wreckage, even if you're limping. That's when healing begins. Not because you won, but because you refuse to keep losing. Third, radical acceptance and reflection. They won't change, but you can. Now, this one's going to sting, because we've all had that thought. Maybe they'll change. Maybe if I'm kind enough, patient enough, hurt enough, if I show them enough of my pain, maybe it'll pierce the armor. But narcissists don't change from compassion. They interpret compassion as weakness. They don't transform through logic. They see logic as a threat. They change if ever. They far from collapse. And most never reach that point because they're fortified by denial and propped up by enablers who are just as invested in the lie. So what does that leave you with? Acceptance. Not the passive kind, not resignation, but the kind of acceptance that demands your courage. The kind that says, "I see them clearly now. They are not a puzzle to be solved. They are a pattern to be avoided." That kind of clarity breaks chains. And then comes the mirror. Adela, not to blame yourself, but to gather the data. How did I end up here? What red flags did I repaint white? The Nola, what did I know and ignore? Because if you don't ask those questions, you'll just walk right back into another burning building wearing the same flammable hope. And it's not shame, it's sovereignty. There's a Hebrew proverb that says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. What you believe about your worth will shape what you allow, what you chase, and what you settle for. Our self-reflection isn't about guilt, it's about liberation. You can't heal what you refuse to see. Fourth, support and community. You can't heal alone. Healing in isolation is a myth. A seductive one, but a myth nonetheless. And I get it. When you've been manipulated, humiliated, and gutted from the inside out, the last thing you want is more people. You start to believe that solitude is safety. But isolation is a slow death. It doesn't protect you, it preserves your pain. Like a museum piece you revisit every day. We were never meant to navigate this kind of pain alone. We're social creatures. Not in the superficial, Instagram hollow kind of way. But in the deep, existential sense. We are meaning-making machines, and meaning is forged in relationship. You need people. Not perfect people, not saviors, but witnesses. Someone who looks you in the eye and says, you're not crazy. You're not broken. You're just human. And you've been hurt. That kind of validation is oxygen for the soul. Whether it's a therapist who holds your truth with tenderness, a friend who listens without fixing, or a stranger online who says, too. Those voices matter. They build the scaffolding while you rebuild your identity. You don't need an audience, you need allies. And maybe for the first time, you'll learn the difference. Healing happens in circles. In kitchens, in late-night texts. They are in whispered, thank you for understanding. It's messy, but it's real. And when people show up with no agenda but to remind you of your worth, you start to believe it again. And that belief, that's where the cracks begin to close. Fifth, what emotional alchemy, what you do with the anger. Anger is not your enemy. But it is dangerous. Because it's powerful. And like any form of power, if you don't harness it, it harnesses you. When you've been betrayed, especially by someone who manipulated love into control, your anger is justified. Of course you're furious. Of course there's rage. That anger is the part of you that remembers your value, even when your mind has forgotten it. It rises to defend the dignity you weren't allowed to express. But let me say this clearly, if you cling to that anger, if you nurture it, feed it, it will wear it like armor, it will rot into something else, bitterness, resentment, contempt, and those are not shields. They're shackles. They don't protect you. They preserve your pain indefinitely. So what do? You transmute it. You take that fire and use it to forge boundaries. They not burn bridges. You allow the anger to teach you what you will never tolerate again, not who you must become. You alchemize it into clarity, into courage, into motion. C.S. Lewis once said, experience is a brutal teacher. You learn, my God. Do you learn? My anger was your teacher. But healing is your graduation, and the diploma. Peace, not the fragile kind that depends on silence or distance, but the kind that comes from no longer needing revenge to feel whole. 6. Meaning from the ashes, rebuilding a real life. After the storm, the wreckage is real. Plans derailed, identity shaken, time lost. But meaning, true. A soul-rooted meaning, isn't found in pristine moments, it's found in rubble. In reassembly, in choosing to build again with trembling hands. See, we live under this illusion that life should follow a script. Plan A may be plan B if you're flexible. But trauma shreds the script. The narcissist lit it on fire. And standing there in the ashes, you've got a choice: to mourn the story that never was, or start telling a new one. It won't look polished, it won't impress anyone on LinkedIn, but it will be yours, and it will be real. People often chase closure, but closure isn't a door someone else shuts for you. It's the wall you stop leaning against. It's that moment you stop waiting for apologies, or justice, or some cosmic balance, and you say, I'm not defined by this, not anymore. And when you begin to pursue purpose, not perfection, everything shifts. There's a passage in the book of Isaiah that says, beauty for ashes. It doesn't say the ashes vanish. It says something can grow there. That's healing. That's post-traumatic truth. The narcissist's goal was to keep you fractured, suspended in the chaos of their story. But when you take the pen back, even if your hand shakes, you become author, architect, and anchor. You don't rebuild the same house. You build one with fire exits, thicker walls, and no room for tyrants. 7th, cutting the cord for good, choosing power over fantasy. There is a sacred moment, sometimes small, barely noticeable to the outside world, where a person finally releases the narcissist fully. Not just in body, but in mind, in memory, in meaning. And that moment, that's when the spell breaks. Because narcissists live on fantasy, They curate illusions. They tell stories where they are the victim, the genius, they the martyr, and they need you in the narrative to keep the delusion intact. The moment you stop playing your part, the script crumbles. You don't need to argue anymore. You don't need to correct the record or hunt down every smear. You just stop buying the lie. And when you do that, the lie loses its power. You begin to choose dignity over drama, peace over provocation, freedom over fixing, and what grows in that new soil? Purpose, not the easy kind. Not the cliché. Everything happens for a reason fluff, but the gritty earned kind. The kind that comes from surviving something that almost unmade you. And deciding you'll make something better. You stop waiting for them to admit what they did. Either you start writing your own ending. You forgive. Not because they deserve it, but because you do. You release. Not because it didn't matter, but because it mattered too damn much to carry forever. And you live. Not like a victim, but like someone who's done being a character in their fantasy, and finally started living their own story. That's not just healing. That's victory. You don't walk out of the fire unchanged. No one does. But change isn't defeat, it's a doorway. The scars you carry, they are not shameful. They are sacred. They're the proof that you felt deeply, endured profoundly, and chose to rise anyway. And yes, it's hard. Of course it is. But healing is not about becoming who you were before the damage. It's about becoming someone who understands the cost of betrayal, and still chooses to love, to trust, to build, to speak. You don't need to be perfect, you just need to be willing. Willing to tell the truth. Willing to stop participating in your own erosion. Willing to finally say, this ends with me. And when you do, something powerful unfolds. Not overnight, not cleanly, but inevitably, you reclaim your voice, your values, your vision, and most of all, your life. So, if this spoke to you, if you saw yourself in these words, then stay here, there's more where this came from. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment, share what hit you hardest, and watch the next one. You're not alone in this. We're building truth together, one step, one soul, one story at a time. Welcome back to yourself.